Italy entered mid-November 2025 beneath a sky that looked bruised and heavy, as if holding back something immense. In the northern regions, the air was thick, damp, and trembling with tension. Meteorologists had been warning residents for days that a series of unstable atmospheric fronts were drifting across the Alps and colliding with warm, moisture-laden Mediterranean winds. But even those who followed the forecasts closely did not imagine how fast or how violently everything would unfold. On November 17, 2025, the first drops began to fall over Friuli Venezia Giulia slowly at first, then suddenly with a force that seemed almost cinematic. It was as if the clouds tore open in one single gesture. In the span of just 6 hours, some areas recorded an astonishing 152 millimeters of rain, with bursts that likely exceeded 40 millimeters in a single hour. The rain wasn't falling in drops, it was falling in sheets, hammering the earth, rooftops, and riverbeds with a violence that turned the familiar landscape unrecognizable. Winds reached 66 kilometers per hour, bending trees, snapping branches, and carrying debris across roads and fields. Storm drains overflowed instantly, rivers rose with frightening speed. The soil, already waterlogged from previous rainfall, could no longer absorb anything. Italy's meteorological agency issued an orange alert for Friuli Venezia Giulia and yellow alerts for 11 other regions. Emergency services were activated in several provinces. Yet even with these precautions, no one could stop what was coming. The land itself was giving way. Around midnight, in the quiet town of Brazzano di Cormans in Gorizia province, a tragedy unfolded so quickly that residents barely had time to understand what was happening. Behind a residential area, the hillside softened, weakened, and saturated began to tremble. People reported hearing a deep rumble, like a distant train or thunder underground. Then, with terrifying speed, the hill collapsed. A massive flow of mud, rocks, and uprooted trees surged forward like a brown wave, swallowing everything in its path. 3 houses disappeared in minutes. Inside one of those homes lived Quirin Kuhner, a 32-year-old German citizen who had moved to the area with his wife. When the landslide began, he managed to lead her to safety. But when he realized that their elderly neighbor, 83-year-old Gorizia Skokai, had not escaped, he made a decision that many would call heroic. He went back inside. Rescue teams later described the house as already half consumed by mud when he re-entered, the structure cracking, floors shifting, the air thick with dust and collapsing plaster. Yet Quirin did not hesitate. It was his final act. Firefighters found his body late in the evening, after hours of dangerous, exhausting work in unstable terrain. Gorizia Skokai's body was found later that same night. The man who lived in the adjacent house survived, but only barely. He suffered a fractured femur, several injuries, and severe shock. At dawn he was transported to Udine Hospital. As news of the Brazzano tragedy spread, another crisis was unfolding in Verza, a part of Roman's di Sonzo. There, the Tor and Gedrio rivers had been swelling for hours. By early morning they could no longer contain the extraordinary volume of water fed by the storm. Both rivers overflowed simultaneously, an event local authorities called unprecedented in speed and magnitude. Within minutes, hundreds of thousands of cubic meters of water poured into residential zones. Entire streets disappeared. Cars floated. Ground floors flooded in seconds. Families woke up to water creeping under bedroom doors, rising fast, turning hallways into brown, swirling rivers. More than 1 meter of water engulfed the village. People rushed to the upper levels of their homes. Others escaped through windows or climbed onto rooftops as the water outside became too deep and too fast to cross. Children cried. Elderly residents struggled to move. Rescuers navigated narrow, debris-filled channels using small light rescue boats, inflatable rafts, and even kayaks. Above, helicopters hovered, shining spotlights on rooftops where families waved flashlights or towels, hoping to be seen. Around 300 people were evacuated from Verza alone. Many of them were brought to a temporary shelter set up inside a gymnasium. Some arrived soaked, shivering, barefoot. Medical teams treated hypothermia, minor injuries, and panic attacks. Volunteers distributed blankets, warm drinks, and dry clothes. Outside, the water continued its slow march through the village, carrying mud, broken furniture, tree trunks, and fragments of everyday life. But this was only part of the national picture. Across northern and central Italy, chaos unfolded simultaneously. In Liguria, rail services near Genoa were disrupted when fallen trees blockaded the tracks. Trains were cancelled or delayed by up to 90 minutes. Roads became impassable, forcing drivers to abandon their vehicles. In Tuscany and Lombardy, rivers overflowed into riverside communities, prompting nighttime evacuations. Schools closed. Businesses shut their doors. Tourist areas, usually lively even in autumn, were submerged under muddy, fast-moving water. The damage was staggering. Early estimates placed the cost between 150 and 200 million euros, covering destroyed homes, collapsed hillsides, washed-out roads, damaged vineyards, broken infrastructure, and emergency response operations. Engineers warned that full recovery, especially in landslide areas, could take months or even more than a year. Temporary housing was arranged for displaced families. Geologists began studying the hills that had failed, taking measurements, installing sensors, and assessing the stability of nearby slopes. Across Gorizia and Udine provinces, more than 250 firefighters conducted over 300 rescue operations in just a short period. High-capacity pumps were brought in from Veneto and Emilia-Romagna to drain the worst flooded zones. Civil protection teams monitored water levels, reinforced banks, and cleared debris from emergency routes. Authorities maintained a high alert, warning that even though rainfall might decrease, the soil was dangerously weakened and new landslides could occur at any moment. Civil Protection Councillor Riccardo Riccardi described the situation as extremely complex. He urged residents to avoid unnecessary movement, stay indoors, and leave room for emergency vehicles. All schools in the region were closed. Landslide risk remained high, and many areas were under constant surveillance. For many Italians, the events of November 2025 were shocking but not surprising. In recent years, Italy has suffered a series of increasingly violent weather events that have left deep scars across the country. The pattern is becoming clearer each year. Warmer seas, more moisture in the air, and storms that grow more explosive. Just 6 months earlier, in May 2025, northern Italy had already been battered by violent storms. On May 22nd, intense thunderstorms formed across the north, producing flooding, destructive hailstorms, and even tornadoes. A tornado near Buia in the Udine province uprooted trees and damaged buildings. Hailstones the size of golf balls crashed into rooftops and cars. Streets flooded in minutes as torrential rain overwhelmed drainage systems. Meteorologists called it one of the most intense spring storm outbreaks in years. And only weeks before that, in April 2025, severe flooding struck areas near Turin. The Frejus torrent overflowed with sudden force, sweeping away cars. 2 people died when their vehicle was carried off by rapid floodwaters. The images from that event, vehicles crushed against bridges, streets transformed into rivers, were a grim reminder of how quickly danger can appear. The previous year had been no better. In March 2025, Tuscany and Emilia-Romagna were struck by a week of relentless rain. The Arno River swelled dangerously. Florence and Pisa activated emergency protocols as water levels rose close to critical thresholds. Authorities declared a red alert. Dozens of people were evacuated. For many Italians, it felt like a repeat of the devastating floods of 2023, when Emilia-Romagna suffered catastrophic losses. In 2024, severe flooding also struck Milan and other areas in northern Italy. Streets turned into fast-moving waterways. Cars were submerged. Residents posted videos online showing torrents of water rushing down urban avenues. The infrastructure, designed decades ago, struggled to withstand the kind of sudden, high-volume rainfall that is now becoming increasingly common. Climate experts have been sounding the alarm for years. The Mediterranean region is warming faster than many other parts of the world. Warmer seas mean more evaporation. More evaporation means more moisture in the air. And more moisture means that when storms form, they can unleash enormous volumes of water in very short periods. It's a recipe for exactly the kind of disasters Italy has been experiencing: floods, landslides, sudden river overflows, violent hailstorms, and unpredictable weather extremes. The stories that emerge from these events are often heartbreaking and heroic at the same time. The story of Quirin Kuner stands out as a symbol of human courage. A man who had every reason to save himself, who managed to bring his wife to safety, but who chose to go back into a collapsing house to try to save his elderly neighbor. Firefighters who risked their lives crawling through unstable debris. Families in Versa who spent the night on rooftops, exposed to cold winds and rain, waiting for the sound of a rescue boat or helicopter. Parents shielding their children from rising water. Neighbors forming human chains to help the elderly climb through windows. In the aftermath of such disasters, there are always calls for change. Scientists and officials emphasize the need for stronger flood defenses, smarter urban planning, and more resilient infrastructure. River embankments must be reinforced. Water channels must be widened. Hillsides must be monitored with modern technology. Houses in high-risk zones must be evaluated and, in some cases, relocated. One significant development came in the summer of 2025, when Italy announced the creation of an AI-based landslide risk assistant. Developed by ISPRA, the Italian Institute for Environmental Protection, the tool gives citizens access to real-time, interactive maps showing risk levels for landslides across the country. It's a modern solution to a growing problem, designed to help people understand and prepare for the dangers lurking in their own neighborhoods. But technology cannot change the weather, and it cannot rebuild the thousands of lives disrupted by storms like the one in November 2025. Across the affected regions, families now faced long months of recovery. Mud must be cleared from houses. Furniture, appliances, and personal belongings must be replaced. Roads must be rebuilt. Fields must be replanted. For some, insurance will cover part of the losses. For others, the financial burden will be overwhelming. In Brazzano di Cormans, the hillside remains a wound in the landscape. The houses destroyed by the landslide were more than buildings. They were homes filled with memories, photographs, and family stories. In Versa, the muddy marks on walls left by floodwaters more than a meter high will remain a haunting reminder of a night of terror. The gymnasium that sheltered hundreds now stands empty, but the echoes of frightened conversations linger in the minds of those who lived through the ordeal. Italy now faces not only the task of rebuilding, but the challenge of preparing for what comes next. Because experts agree, storms like the ones witnessed in 2024 and 2025 are not isolated incidents. They are part of a new pattern, a new climate reality. And the November 2025 disaster may not be the last of its kind. The story of Italy's floods and landslides is a story of nature's growing power and humanity's vulnerability. It is a story of loss, courage, resilience, and warning. A story repeated in different forms across